Hello everybody and welcome to the spooky month. For October, we're going to be covering a little story that wasn't written by Cyan. Amazing, I know. We're going to be going over a little story called Hotel Cryptid. Hotel Cryptid is a story written back in 2021 by my good friend Mars, in what is apparently a trilogy? It's a really good read, and I believe it's getting rewritten at some point too, so when that's out, you can go and read that, or you can read how it is right now, despite Mars's protests. This video comes out on time. It should be on a special day too, so I hope you enjoy it, Mars. I don't have a still to use for you, so just, yeah. There we go. First, I'm going to be going over a summary of the story, then doing my own review and analysis of it. So let's just get right to it and talk about the story. So Hotel Cryptid starts up with an explanation of what the hotel is, a hotel where each floor is named and themed after a certain cryptid. Who would have guessed? We're introduced to the first character in the hotel, Juniper, who mans the front desk. The setup is that a family of 5 comes in and asks for a room and gets escorted by the second hotel staff, Dahlia, the head of pirates. Yet again, before the end of the first chapter, a woman named Beck makes a brief appearance, followed by a nameless boss who thinks the family would make good targets. The next chapter starts with more character introductions, a reintroduction to Juniper and Dahlia, but also gives us explanations of Arya, a woman who acts like a mermaid on the Cracked floor, Beck and Felicity, who manage the Bigfoot floor, and Charles, who manages the Loch Ness Monster floor. These may be overly simple explanations of them, but we'll get used to seeing them throughout the story, so don't worry. They all come together at a meeting where they discuss the family that arrived, though they come to no actual conclusion on that discussion. Juniper then goes to the front door of the hotel and touches it, and immediately gets blasted backwards and breaks her neck, completely scarring the little girl and leaving her with everlasting trauma. The little girl is named Tabitha. I'll remember that for later. When Juniper wakes up, we're introduced to Maria, who promptly calls her an idiot. Apparently Juniper has a history of breaking her neck. It's a bit of a problem. We cut to Tabitha telling her mother that she just watched a woman die and gets gaslit that she saw nothing. She is so upset that she runs to the roof of the hotel where she meets the owner from before, Tobias. In the most casual act of documented murder, Tobias just pushes her off the roof, and to her death. The girl's parents are understandably freaking out that they can't find her daughter, and we're introduced to another employee, Antoinette. After the cops are called and nothing is found or done, they just drop the case and leave. I guess police just don't work like they used to. Later that night, when the employees are all sitting around a campfire and describing how bad the day was, Tabitha appears. Kinda makes me wonder how deep in debt Tobias is from court fees for getting sued every time someone disappears on his hotel grounds when he needs a new employee. Or how many watch lists he's on. After we learn that Dahlia and Arya are a couple and watching Juniper put Tabitha down for bed, we are introduced to more characters. Cecilia is a gambler from Louisiana. She has such heavy gambit energy that it's kind of funny.
First we charge the car, then we blow it up. You wanna play with gambit? Here, take a car.
Calico is probably my favorite character, I think. Maya is a tailor from New York, and that's it. And Cecilia and Grace are indeed there. The next day, Cecilia is showing Tabitha around the hotel and tells her another story, being raised in New Orleans by her mom and dad, and eventually having kids. The next day, Cecilia is showing Tabitha around the hotel and telling her stories about how she was raised in New Orleans by her mom and dad and had kids. That's kinda sad, actually. Suddenly, right after she tells that story, a few people walk into the hotel and they just happen to be her family. We get to see a sweet reunion between Cecilia and her family, a lighthearted moment in a book full of non-stop tragedy. Oh yeah, this is also where we learn that Calico is like the problem child. The next morning, Tabitha sees Grace, Maya, and Charles and decides to hang out with them, while Dahlia holds a knife to Tobias for being generally creepy. Honestly, valid. When everyone overhears the commotion, they go to investigate and see a crime in progress, though Juniper seems really not interested in stopping it. We then get a flashback that introduces us to Tobias's wife, Mary Ann Beth, and their child, JJ. Once the flashback is over, we're snapped back to reality, with Arya telling Juniper that something has happened to Beckett. Juniper arrives just in time to see Beckett, who was shot in the back, just fade out of existence. After a fair dose of panic and a disturbingly quick funeral, Juniper finds a note warning about Tobias and Beckett's jacket. Does Juniper tell the others about this note or even try to show them it? While the gang is very depressed about Beckett's death, Dahlia and Arya finally kiss and become a couple, so at least there's that. The next part is mostly Juniper doing a lot of research while the story goes on through a lightning round of character origins, so let's do that too. Dahlia was an 18-year-old girl in 1879 who wanted to be more like men, much to her mother's disapproval. While staying at Hotel Cryptid, she trauma dumps on Tobias and he shoots her. Becca Campbell was a baker's wife in 1981 when her and her husband went to Hotel Cryptid for a date. When she goes back to get the coat she left behind, she finds Tobias playing the piano, and like a gentleman, he calls her gorgeous before slitting her throat. Charles was a 1953 greaser and a closeted gay with a crush on his best bud Damien. Him and Damien go to the new Hotel Cryptid together for a drink where Charles is gunned down by Tobias for literally no reason. Tobias didn't even do it discreetly either. It baffles me how no authorities have caught up with him. Aria was drowned by Tobias, and her first real friend after death was Dahlia, solidifying their friendship. Felicity was just a little girl in Maryland in 1793 when she was walking through the hotel's garden and was mauled to death by wolves. Antoinette was a ballerina who was strangled to death after staying at the hotel for a competition. Maria was the wife of a mob boss who ended up being poisoned and died. Calico was a Russian girl who was raised by ex-cons and ends up dying in the hotel. I know these are very simple explanations, but my goal is to give you the spark notes here. Go read the story. We learned that JJ would have been killed by a bear if Tobias hadn't used his best Red Dead Redemption skills and razzle-dazzled on the bear with a pistol. Her file implies she might not be with the hotel personnel anymore. Maybe nobody knows it? I don't know. Mari's really wants you to be confused about this part at this point. The next important story beat was the backstory of a person named Georgia. Georgia was Juniper's friend when she was at the hotel, but Georgia made one too many PR complaints to Tobias and got burned alive. Juniper threatens Tobias with ruining him with a secret, and Tobias pulls the Uno reverse and gets very upset. Then we get more backstory that JJ had a secret lover named Nathaniel. This could definitely not have significant story impact later. Meanwhile, Maria finds a note from Nathaniel to JJ in front of Juniper's door and gets suspicious that Juniper isn't who she says she is. A bit of a logical leap, especially because they've seen Juniper reading files around the hotel, but we're rolling with it. Now shove all those characters out of your brain, it's new character time. Michelle is a shop clerk on the Yeti floor. Her backstory goes back to Salem, Oregon in 1963. She was a shy 16-year-old and accidentally killed a guy who didn't realize that no means no. We go forward in time after Michelle's death to find out she's actually a transgender woman who apparently has the worst floor to work on. I'm sorry, but who wants to work in perpetual blizzard? Oh yeah, she also has a crush on Antoinette, but Antoinette has a date with Georgie. Drama. After Antoinette comes back from her date, Maria slides up with her corkboard and pictures with thumbtacks and strings attached and shit and says she's been working for days on figuring out who JJ is in her latest fit of hyperfixation. After days of Sherlock Holmes level deductions, she has nailed down who she thinks JJ is, but the story cuts out just as she says who she thinks it is. Anyway, Calico gets a letter from someone named Sapphire. After that is the next major story beat of Tobias watching his wife pass away in a flashback, kind of destroys him, and that's why he wants to watch humanity suffer. After that decision though, JJ understandably does not agree with her father. Everyone except Juniper is invited to a super secret Tobias hate club meeting. Their goal is to find a way to bring down Tobias with the information they have on JJ. I think. I'm not 100% sure how they planned on bringing down Tobias, but there's honestly one of him and a lot of them, so they can just overpower him. Juniper is so salty about not being invited to the hate club that she reports to Tobias about it, which he's somehow surprised about. All the while, the rest of the staff play a huge game of pass the note across the entire hotel floor just to deliver 2 words. Tomorrow night. Very anticlimactic, but it made a very funny ending. When tomorrow night arrives, Juniper wakes up in the middle of the night and can find literally nobody. Not staff, not guests, nobody. Suddenly she hears a commotion and goes to investigate and sees the entire hostel staff aiming a gun at Tobias's head, and why did it take this long for this to happen realistically? Did they not think to all mob him at once anytime sooner? Oh, and it gets dropped that Juniper is JJ. It really shouldn't be a surprise. While Maria goes on about how she figured out JJ's identity, Tobias knocks the gun out of her hand, which Juniper picks up. After Tobias rolls for persuasion to convince Juniper not to shoot him, he rolls an abysmal 1 and Juniper shoots him. After she does that, the whole hotel just kind of disappears around her and everyone says their goodbyes before leaving Juniper on her own. The story ends with Juniper walking away, free from her father and the hotel, ready to live her life. But the story has an epilogue that shows Juniper 5 years later as an author, sitting at a coffee shop. On her way out though, she bumps into people who look and sound just like Nathaniel and Dahlia, kinda like some kind of creepy Flashpoint scenario. The story actually ends with Juniper uncertain as to why the hotel's staff are back like this, and uncertain if Tobias is somehow involved again. And with that, we end the summary of our story, and there ends Hotel Cryptid. Alright, that was a pretty long summary, so now it's time for me to give my actual opinions on the story. I tried to keep my opinions to a minimum in the previous section so I can present them all here. At first I was gonna give a criticism that there's zero explanation for why everyone actually fears Tobias, since there's a metric ton of them and one of him, but honestly, being shown him never doing more than a regular human thing is somehow making him more intimidating. Like, they're all afraid of Tobias, but we're never even explicitly shown why. We see him make Georgia burst into flames, but we don't actually see him do like much of anything, and you know, it's not too bad to assume that if they all just mob him, there's not much he can do. I mean, even when holding him at gunpoint, they're all terrified, so it implies he has some power beyond our knowledge that's pretty sizable, and we should fear it. I don't know if Mars intended for that. Maybe, maybe not. Either way, it comes across that way, and it makes Tobias' character better for it. I think the final climax with Juniper making her choice against Tobias with the gun was really well written. Probably the best scene in the book, in my opinion. You can really feel all the tension within the scene, and honestly, it's just super cool and epic. It kind of thematically explores Juniper's want to fight back against her parentage and break free from his control, which also makes her final decision against him more satisfying. It pretty well puts an end to her character arc right then and there. Alright, first criticism, for any writer out there really, separate your lines when people talk. Don't have giant chunks of text like that with multiple people talking. It gets confusing real fast. I guess another thing is also that it was way too easy for me to guess that Juniper was JJ, because all flashbacks only happen when the main character in the flashback is immediately doing something, and flashbacks with JJ are like always preceded by Juniper doing something. So maybe try to disjoint them, try to throw you off the track maybe. I read this book twice, and even the first time I saw the twist as kind of obvious because of that. One thing I really did love though is just the complete nonsense nature of the hotel. This hotel is like everything. It's got a casino, it's got a bar, it's got a pool, it's got a meat locker, it's got comedically everything. Tobias was also a really good villain, I'm not gonna lie. That's it for all the criticisms though. Even with everything I had to say, I can't say anything actually ruined the story by any stretch of the imagination. You wrote a good story here, Mars. That I can say for certain. Hotel Cryptid was such a blast to read, and I can't wait to read the other books in the series too, and maybe even review them. This took longer to make than I thought it would, but man, it's worth it. It's a little bit outside my usual video motive, but I figured that if I can review stories of Cyan, I can review stories of other people too. And Mars, since I know you're watching, you wrote an amazing story here. Thanks for sitting through this, and look forward to the other videos and stories in the future. Follow me on my Insta for small writing previews or for fun. My writing commissions are also always open, so you can contact me there. Have a great day, stay beautiful, and bye!